When looking at the topic of time, we thought it would be interesting to organize an experiment to see how various materials corrode over many years. After several hours of discussion, we finally agreed to examine how cables corrode in suspension bridges. We decided to use several types of materials found in suspension bridges: magnesium, iron, copper, nylon, and cotton in various thicknesses. The first step of our experiment was to see how much weight each of the materials could hold before snapping. After this, we went on to examine the same materials which had been submerged in sulfuric acid for 10 minutes. We used a high concentration of acid to replicate the impact over a longer period of time. After washing the materials in distilled water, we repeated the first section of the experiment with the newly corroded materials. We found that, in general, the materials couldn't hold as much weight. Our initial planning took place on Thursday evening. After throwing about various ideas, we decided to exclude the notions of examining caffeine and exercise and to turn our focus towards acid rain. In order to obtain our results, we underwent two experiments, one in the field of chemistry and the other in the field of physics. The first experiment in physics consisted of measuring the tensile strength of each of the materials we chose. In order to do this, we clamped the materials to a table with a G-clamp and attached a crowbar to it. On the crowbar, we laid a number of weights on it and kept adding weights to the crowbar until the material snapped. In order to ensure safety, we placed bubble wrap on the floor so that there would be no damage. The next experiment we conducted took place in the chemistry department. We used several concentrations of sulfuric acid, 0.1, 0.5, 1, and 2 molar. We dipped the materials that we had previously used for the physics experiment into the different concentrations of sulfuric acid in order to conduct the same experiment again. We took these newly dipped materials into the physics department to conduct the same experiment we did in the first part. We clamped the materials to the table again and tested their tensile strength. Okay. Upon looking at our data, we found that our initial hypothesis was generally correct. We could find a trend in the increasing acidity of the materials in correlation with the decreasing tensile strength that they had. Our hypothesis being that acid rain would affect the tensile strength of suspension bridges was also found to be correct. Extrapolating the data that we found, we can see that after a specific time, the acid rain corrodes enough of the material in order to make the tensile strength ineffective. Our control variable for this experiment was the length of each material, which we maintained at 20 centimeters for each repeat. Our independent variable was the concentration of the acid, which we changed for each sub-experiment. Our dependent variable, which resulted, was how much weight the materials could hold. In conclusion, we found that our experiment was a success in determining the validity of acid rain in relation to suspension bridges. We found that acid rain does indeed have an effect on the tensile strength of these materials, and upon extrapolation, could figure out the amount of time needed before suspension bridges would need to exchange their wires.